The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Metropolitan Medical Center, casting long shadows across the polished floors. Dr. Maya Johnson rushed down the busy hallway, her white coat fluttering behind her like wings. She was running late for her rounds after getting stuck in unexpected traffic. The hospital buzzed with its usual morning energy. Nurses chatting at their stations, orderlies pushing gurneys, and worried family members huddled in corners speaking in hushed tones. Maya checked her watch and picked up her pace. Being one of only 3 black neurosurgeons at this prestigious hospital meant she always felt extra pressure to be perfect. Any mistake would be judged twice as harshly. 10 years into her career, she still felt she had to prove herself every single day. "Dr. Johnson," called out Nurse Patel, waving a file at her from the nurse's station. "Your new patient's scans just came in." Maya smiled and changed direction, heading toward the round desk where several nurses were busy at their computers. "Thanks, Rita," she said, taking the folder. "Anything I should know before I look at these?" Nurse Patel's expression tightened slightly. "Patient in room 307. Name's Eleanor Whitfield. Bit difficult, if I'm being honest." Maya nodded. Difficult was nurse code for rude. After years of working in healthcare, Maya had seen it all. Patients who were scared, angry, in denial. Fear did strange things to people, especially when facing the unknown territory of serious illness. "I'll keep that in mind," Maya said, opening the file to scan the initial notes. Severe headaches, dizziness, 1 episode of fainting. Could be many things, but Maya's gut was already leaning towards something neurological. As Maya approached room 307, she could hear a woman's voice, sharp and demanding, even through the closed door. "I said I want a pillow without synthetic filling. Is that so hard to understand? This hospital charges enough. Surely you can find me one decent pillow." Maya took a deep breath, put on her most professional smile, and knocked twice before entering. The room was private, with large windows overlooking the city. In the bed sat a white woman in her 50s with perfectly highlighted blonde hair and manicured nails painted soft pink. Despite being in a hospital gown, she had somehow maintained full makeup, including mascara that now looked slightly smudged beneath tired eyes. A young aide was backing away from the bed, looking flustered. "I'll see what I can find, ma'am," he mumbled before slipping past Maya and out the door. "Good morning, Mrs. Whitfield," Maya said warmly. "I'm Dr. Johnson from neurosurgery. I'll be overseeing your case." Eleanor Whitfield looked up, her eyes scanning Maya from head to toe. Her gaze lingered on Maya's face, then dropped to the ID badge hanging from her neck. A flash of something crossed her features. Disappointment? Suspicion? "You're the brain surgeon?" Eleanor asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Yes, I am," Maya replied, keeping her tone light despite the familiar weight settling in her stomach. She'd seen that look hundreds of times before. "I understand you've been experiencing some concerning symptoms. I'd like to discuss what we found in your initial scans." Eleanor shifted in her bed, turning slightly away from Maya. "Is Dr. Peterson available? He treated my husband last year." "Dr. Peterson is on sabbatical," Maya explained patiently. "But I assure you I'm fully qualified to handle your case." Eleanor sniffed. "How long have you worked here? You look rather young." "I've been with Metropolitan for 6 years, and I did my residency at Johns Hopkins," Maya said, fighting to keep the defensiveness from her voice. She'd learned early on not to get pulled into proving her credentials. "Well," Eleanor said, her lips pursed, "I'd like a second opinion. No offense, but I want someone with more experience." Maya recognized the code word. More experience usually meant someone who looked more like what Eleanor thought a doctor should look like. "Of course you're entitled to a second opinion," Maya said, opening the file again. "But first, let me explain what we're seeing in your MRI results, because they're quite concerning and time-sensitive." Eleanor waved her hand dismissively. "I asked for a real doctor, not some affirmative action hire. I want someone qualified. I want to speak to your supervisor." The words hung in the air between them, sharp and impossible to ignore. Maya felt her cheeks burn, not with shame but with a slow, simmering anger she had learned to control years ago. "I'll have Dr. Williams, our department head, come by," Maya said, her voice steady despite the thundering of her heart. But Mrs. Whitfield, I need to emphasize that your condition requires immediate attention. As Maya turned to leave, she clutched the file tightly in her hands. This wasn't the first time, and it wouldn't be the last. But something about Eleanor's scans worried her deeply. Whatever Eleanor thought of her, Maya knew one thing for certain. This woman needed help, and soon. Maya stepped into the quiet hallway and leaned against the wall, taking a moment to collect herself. Eleanor's words still hum in the air around her. After all these years, the sting never lessened. She closed her eyes and took 3 deep breaths, a technique her mother had taught her long ago. "You okay?" Maya opened her eyes to see Nurse Patel watching her with concern. "I'm fine, Rita. Nothing I haven't heard before," Maya said, straightening her white coat. "But I need to review these scans right away. Something doesn't look right." In the reading room, Maya pulled up Eleanor's MRI on the large monitor. The images loaded slowly, one slice of Eleanor's brain after another appearing on screen. Maya leaned forward, her trained eyes scanning each image methodically. When she reached the temporal lobe section, she froze. "Oh no," she whispered, enlarging the image. There it was. A tangled mess of blood vessels nestled deep in Eleanor's brain. Not just any tangle, but an arteriovenous malformation, where arteries connected directly to veins without the normal smaller vessels between them. This rare condition created a dangerous web that could burst at any moment, causing a deadly bleed in the brain. Maya clicked through more images, her concern deepening. This wasn't just any AVM, it was positioned in one of the most difficult areas to reach, near parts of the brain controlling speech and movement. Most neurosurgeons would consider it inoperable. But Maya knew better. 3 years ago, she had completed a specialized fellowship focused entirely on these complex cases. She had even written her research paper on this exact type of malformation, developing a new surgical approach that reduced the risks significantly. Her technique had been published in medical journals and was now taught in some medical schools. The door to the reading room opened and Dr. Williams walked in. He was the head of neurosurgery. A tall man with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "I hear Mrs. Whitfield in 307 is asking for someone with more experience," he said, making air quotes with his fingers. Maya nodded. "She wants a second opinion." "Well, she's getting one," Dr. Williams said, stepping closer to the screen. "What are we looking at?" Maya pointed to the tangle of vessels. Complex AVM in the left temporal region, extending into the speech center. At least 4 major feeders, 2 draining veins. She traced the outline with her finger. "It's already showing signs of stress on this wall here. I'd give it days, maybe weeks before a rupture." Dr. Williams whistled low. "Bad location, very bad." "It's going to require immediate intervention," Maya said, "and a specialized approach to avoid permanent damage." Dr. Williams studied the scan, then looked at Maya. "Who do you recommend for this case?" "In this hospital?" "Me," Maya said without hesitation. "I've done 17 similar cases with my modified vascular technique. 14 full recoveries, 2 with minor deficits, 1. She paused, the face of the young man she couldn't say flashing in her mind. 1 mortality. Dr. Williams nodded slowly. "Best record possible with this type of case." He looked back at the scan. "Anyone else in the department you trust with this?" Maya thought about the other neurosurgeons on staff. Dr. Phillips was brilliant but specialized in tumors, not vascular malformations. Dr. Jao was still building experience with complex cases. Dr. Kin was excellent but currently away at a conference. "No," she said finally, "not for this specific type." Dr. Williams sighed. "Well, our patient in 307 is in for a reality check then." Maya gathered the scans and notes. She felt no satisfaction knowing that Eleanor would soon have to face the truth that the doctor she had dismissed so easily might be her only hope for survival. "I'll go talk to her," Dr. Williams said. "You prepare the surgical plan." "I'd like to be there when you tell her," Maya said. "She needs to understand the severity of what we're dealing with." As they walked back toward Eleanor's room, Maya reviewed the details of the surgery in her mind. It would be challenging. 6 hours at minimum, possibly longer. Every millimeter would matter. One small slip could mean permanent disability or death. Despite everything, Maya felt her mind shifting fully into doctor mode. Whatever Eleanor had said, whatever prejudice she carried, none of that mattered now. What mattered was saving her life. The hospital cafeteria buzzed with evening activity as Maya sat alone in the corner, stirring a cup of tea she hadn't taken a single sip from. The clock on the wall showed 7:43 p.m. Her shift had officially ended 3 hours ago, but she couldn't bring herself to leave yet. On the table in front of her lay Eleanor's file, open to the surgical consent forms, still unsigned. Dr. Williams had explained the gravity of the situation to Eleanor that afternoon. He had shown her the scans, pointed out the dangerous tangle of blood vessels in her brain, and emphasized that time was critical. He had also made it crystal clear that Dr. Maya Johnson was the most qualified surgeon for this particular case. Eleanor's response? She had requested time to think about her options. Maya's phone buzzed with a text from her sister. "Still cooking dinner? The kids keep asking when Auntie Maya is coming." Maya typed back quickly. "Running late. Surgery complications. Don't wait up." It wasn't entirely a lie. This case had certainly become complicated, though not in the way her sister would assume. "Dr. Johnson." Maya looked up to see Nurse Chen approaching her table with a concerned look. "I thought you'd gone home hours ago," Chen said, sliding into the seat across from Maya. "Just reviewing some case notes," Maya replied, closing the file. Chen nodded toward the folder. "The Whitfield case." Maya nodded. "Word travels fast around here," Chen said with a small smile. For what it's worth, most of us on the floor wanted to tell her exactly where she could stick her second opinion. Maya couldn't help but laugh. "I appreciate the support, but it wouldn't have helped." "Probably not," Chen agreed. "People like that don't change easily." Maya stared at her cold tea. "You know what the worst part is? If she keeps delaying, she might not make it to surgery at all. That AVM could rupture any time." They sat in silence for a moment before Chen spoke again. "So what will you do? Pass her case to someone else?" The question hung in the air. Maya had been wrestling with it all afternoon. She had every right to step away. No one would blame her after how Eleanor had treated her. Dr. Phillips could possibly handle the case, though he had never performed this specific procedure before. Maya thought back to her early days in medical school, when one of her professors had pulled her aside after a particularly difficult week. Maya had been the only black woman in her class facing subtle and not so subtle discrimination daily. "There will be days," the professor had told her, "when you'll question why you put yourself through this. On those days, remember what brought you here in the first place." What had brought Maya to medicine wasn't the prestige or the paycheck. It was the simple belief that everyone deserved care, regardless of who they were. "I can't walk away," Maya said finally. "Not because of her, but because of me." I took an oath. Chen nodded, understanding in her eyes. "For what it's worth, I think that makes you the bigger person." "Not bigger," Maya said, gathering her papers. "Just doing my job." As she walked through the quiet evening hallways toward Eleanor's room, Maya prepared herself mentally. She wouldn't beg for the chance to operate. She wouldn't defend her credentials again or explain why she deserved respect. She would simply present the facts. Outside room 307, Maya paused to gather her thoughts. Through the partially open door, she could hear Eleanor on the phone. "And now they're saying this black doctor is supposedly the expert on my condition," Eleanor was saying, her voice low but clear. "I've asked them to find someone else, but apparently she's developed some special technique. Yes, I know time is important, but..." Maya took a deep breath and knocked on the doorframe. Eleanor looked up, startled, and quickly ended her call. "Mrs. Whitfield," Maya said, stepping into the room. "We need to talk about your surgery options." Eleanor's face tightened, but something had changed in her expression. Was it fear? Uncertainty? The bravado from this morning had faded, replaced by the vulnerable look of someone confronting their mortality. "The other doctors," Eleanor began, "they said you've done this surgery before." "Yes," Maya said simply, 17 times. Eleanor swallowed hard. "And the others here, they haven't." "No." The silence stretched between them as Eleanor seemed to struggle with something inside herself. Medical need versus deep-seated prejudice. Life versus pride. Maya waited, knowing that this moment would determine everything that came next. Morning sunlight streamed through the hospital window, casting long rectangles of light across Eleanor's bed. She had barely slept, her mind racing with fears about her condition and the impossible choice she now faced. Every few hours, a nurse had come to check her vitals, each time reminding her that she needed to make a decision soon. A soft knock on the door made Eleanor look up. Dr. Williams entered, his tall frame filling the doorway. Behind him was Dr. Johnson, the black doctor Eleanor had dismissed so quickly the day before. Eleanor felt her cheeks flush with a mixture of embarrassment and lingering resistance. "Good morning, Mrs. Whitfield," Dr. Williams said, his voice professional but warm. "How are you feeling today?" "The headache is worse," Eleanor admitted. Her right temple throbbed with a steady, frightening pressure that hadn't been there yesterday. Dr. Williams nodded, exchanging a quick glance with Dr. Johnson. "That's consistent with what we're seeing on your scans. The malformation is showing signs of increased pressure." Eleanor shifted uncomfortably in her bed. "Have you found another surgeon yet? Someone who's done this surgery before?" There was an awkward pause before Dr. Williams pulled up a chair beside her bed. Dr. Johnson remained standing near the foot of the bed, her face calm and unreadable. "Mrs. Whitfield," Dr. Williams began carefully, "I want to be completely transparent with you about your situation. The arteriovenous malformation in your brain is in an extremely difficult location. Very few surgeons attempt to operate on AVMs in this particular area because the risks are so high." Eleanor's mouth went dry. "But you said yesterday I need surgery." "You do," Dr. Williams confirmed. "And quickly. Which is why we're fortunate to have Dr. Johnson on staff." He gestured toward Maya, who stepped forward and placed a medical journal on Eleanor's tray table. It was open to an article with complex medical diagrams. 3 years ago, Dr. Williams continued, Dr. Johnson developed a new surgical approach specifically for cases like yours. This article details the technique she pioneered during her fellowship at Johns Hopkins. It's now being taught to neurosurgery residents across the country. Eleanor glanced at the article, noticing Dr. Johnson's name listed as the lead author. "What Dr. Williams is saying," Maya spoke for the first time, her voice steady and professional, "is that this specific surgery requires specialized training that most neurosurgeons don't have. Even excellent surgeons without this specific experience would face much higher risks of complications." Eleanor looked back and forth between the two doctors. "So you're saying?" "I'm saying that Dr. Johnson is your best option," Dr. Williams stated firmly. "Not just here, but possibly in the entire region. We could transfer you to another hospital, but that would take time you don't have. And there's no guarantee their surgeons would have more experience with this specific condition than Dr. Johnson." Eleanor's hands trembled slightly as she processed this information. The pain in her temple pulsed, a frightening reminder of what was happening inside her head. "How dangerous is this thing in my brain?" she asked quietly. "Without surgery." Maya stepped closer, her professional demeanor never wavering. "The 5-year mortality rate is over 50%. But with this specific AVM's location and the signs of weakening we're seeing, I'd be concerned about much more immediate risks. Days, possibly hours." The room fell silent except for the steady beep of the heart monitor, which had quickened slightly. "I don't understand," Eleanor finally said, her voice smaller now. "If you're so qualified, why aren't you the head of the department?" She looked at Dr. Williams, then back at Maya. Dr. Williams raised an eyebrow. "Dr. Johnson is 15 years younger than me and already internationally recognized in her field. Give her time." There was no mistaking the pride in his voice. Eleanor stared at her hands, now clutched tightly in her lap. All her life, she had made certain assumptions about people, who was qualified, who was smart, who deserved respect. Now her life literally depended on someone she had dismissed without a second thought. "I need to make a phone call," Eleanor said, not meeting the doctor's eyes. "To my husband. Then I'll decide." "Of course," Dr. Williams nodded. "But please understand, every hour matters now." As the doctors turned to leave, Eleanor suddenly called out, "Dr. Johnson?" Maya paused at the door. "The headache, is it normal for it to be pulsing like this?" A flicker of concern crossed Maya's face. "No, that's not a good sign." "I'll have the nurse bring you something for the pain, but Mrs. Whitfield." Their eyes met. "Don't take too long to decide." As the door closed behind them, Eleanor reached for her phone with shaking hands. For the first time since being admitted, she felt truly afraid. The pre-operation room hummed with quiet efficiency as nurses moved around Eleanor, attaching monitors and checking equipment. The harsh fluorescent lights made everything look too bright, too stark. Elena had signed the consent forms an hour ago, after a tearful phone call with her husband Tom, who was rushing back from his business trip but wouldn't arrive until after the surgery. Blood pressure 160/95, a nurse reported, frowning slightly at the numbers. Elena stared at the ceiling, trying to control her breathing. The headache had grown worse, much worse. Now it wrapped around her skull like a tight band, with occasional stabs of pain so intense they made her vision blur. She'd never been so scared in her life. The door swung open, and Dr. Johnson walked in, already dressed in blue surgical scrubs. Her hair was completely covered by a surgical cap, and she carried Eleanor's chart in her hands. "Mrs. Whitfield, we're almost ready to take you in," Maya said, checking the monitors. "How's the pain level now, on a scale of 1 to 10? 8, Eleanor whispered. "Maybe 9. Maya nodded, making a note in the chart. "We've increased your pain medication as much as we safely can before surgery. Once we're in the operating room, you won't feel anything." Eleanor watched as Maya reviewed the chart with calm focus. This woman would soon be cutting into her brain, navigating through the delicate tissue that made Eleanor who she was, her memories, her thoughts, her ability to speak and move. One small slip. "Aren't you scared?" The words slipped out before Eleanor could stop them. Maya looked up, seeming surprised by the question. For a moment, her professional mask softened. "Every surgery carries risks," she said carefully. "But I'm confident in the procedure we've planned." "That's not what I asked," Eleanor said, her voice trembling slightly. Maya set down the chart and moved closer to Eleanor's bedside. "Yes, I get nervous before every major surgery, not because I doubt my abilities, but because I understand what's at stake. That nervousness keeps me sharp, focused." Eleanor nodded, oddly comforted by the honest answer. "Your parents must be proud. Having a daughter who's a brain surgeon." A small smile touched Maya's lips. "My father passed away when I was in medical school. But my mother, yes, she's proud. Though she still calls me every week to make sure I'm eating properly." The simple human detail, a mother worrying about her daughter despite her impressive career, made Maya suddenly seem more real to Eleanor. Not just a doctor, but a person with a life outside these hospital walls. "I never wanted to be anything but a doctor," Maya continued, checking Eleanor's IV line. Even when the path wasn't easy. The unspoken hum between them, the additional barriers Maya must have faced, barriers that people like Eleanor had helped create. A nurse poked her head into the room. "Ore is ready, Dr. Johnson." Maya nodded. "We'll be right there." She turned back to Eleanor. "Do you have any last-minute questions?" Eleanor swallowed hard. There were 1,000 questions spinning in her head, but only one made it past her lips. "How many of these surgeries have you performed?" she asked, grabbing Maya's wrist with sudden intensity. 17, Maya answered calmly, not pulling away from Eleanor's grip. "With a 94% success rate. The other surgeons here have performed none." For the first time, Eleanor looked at Dr. Johnson, really looked at her, and saw not just the color of her skin, but the steady confidence in her eyes, the calm certainty in her posture. This woman knew exactly what she was doing. "I'm sorry," Eleanor whispered, her voice barely audible. "For what I said yesterday." Maya's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes, surprise, perhaps, or cautious appreciation of the effort. "Let's focus on getting you through this surgery. We can talk about yesterday when you're recovering." The anesthesiologist entered the room, a friendly-looking man with a salt and pepper beard. "Ready to take a little nap, Mrs. Whitfield?" Elena didn't answer him. Her eyes were still on Maya. "My husband Tom will be here when I wake up," she said. "He doesn't know what I said to you." "I'd like to keep it that way." Maya nodded once, understanding what Eleanor was really saying. She was ashamed of her behavior. "Doctor-patient confidentiality," Maya said simply. She stepped back as the anesthesiologist began explaining the sedation process. As the drugs began flowing into her veins, Elena felt the room growing distant. Her last conscious thought before darkness claimed her was wondering if she would ever wake up again, and if the last meaningful thing she had done was insult the woman now trying to save her life. The operating room fell silent as Dr. Maya Johnson stepped through the doors. 6 people waited inside, 2 nurses, an anesthesiologist, an assistant surgeon, and 2 surgical technicians. All eyes turned to Maya as she entered. They knew what kind of case this was. They knew the risks. "Good morning, everyone," Maya said, her voice clear and confident. Mrs. Eleanor Whitfield, 54-year-old female with a complex arteriovenous malformation in the left temporal region. Let's save her life today. The team nodded, faces serious behind their masks. They had worked with Maya before. They trusted her skills. Eleanor lay unconscious on the operating table, but head secured in a special frame to prevent even the slightest movement during surgery. A blue surgical drape covered her body, leaving only her head exposed. The anesthesiologist monitored her vitals from behind a wall of equipment. BP stable at 120/80. Heart rate 72 and regular, he reported. Maya nodded and approached the table. A nurse helped her put on her surgical gown and gloves. Another handed her a marker, and Maya carefully drew lines on Eleanor's shaved scalp, mapping out exactly where she would make the incision. "Scalpel," Maya said, holding out her hand. The first cut was always the most straightforward part. Maya's hand was perfectly steady as she traced the line she had drawn, parting skin from skull. There was surprisingly little blood. They had prepared the area well. A surgical tech dabbed away what little blood appeared, keeping the field clean. "Drill," Maya requested next. The high-pitched whine of the surgical drill filled the room as Maya carefully created small holes in Eleanor's skull. With practiced precision, she connected these holes using a special saw, removing a section of bone to reveal the protective covering of the brain beneath. Bone flap secured, the assistant surgeon confirmed, placing the removed section of skull in a sterile solution where it would be kept until it was time to replace it. Maya took a deep breath. This was where the real work began. She adjusted the surgical microscope suspended above the operating table, bringing into focus the delicate tissues underneath. "Dura looks good," Maya commented as she carefully opened the protective membrane covering the brain. No signs of bleeding or increased pressure. For the next hour, Maya worked in near silence, communicating with her team through brief requests for instruments and occasional updates on her progress. Her entire world narrowed to the tiny field visible through the microscope, Eleanor's brain tissue, the blood vessels that fed it, and somewhere in that delicate landscape, the dangerous tangle that threatened Eleanor's life. "I can see the malformation now," Maya finally said. "It's larger than it appeared on the scans. Multiple feeders coming from the middle cerebral artery. On the monitors, Eleanor's blood pressure flickered slightly higher. Is that a problem?" the assistant surgeon asked quietly. Maya shook her head slightly, never taking her eyes from the microscope. "Not unexpected, but it means we need to be extra careful with the dissection. Hand me the micro-scissors." Time seemed to stop in the operating room as Maya began the painstaking process of separating normal blood vessels from the tangled ones. Each vessel needed to be identified, each connection understood before she could decide which to preserve and which to close off. One wrong move could cause catastrophic bleeding or cut off blood supply to critical areas of Eleanor's brain. Sweat beaded on Maya's forehead beneath her surgical cap. A nurse gently dabbed it away before it could drip onto her mask. "Thank you," Maya murmured, never shifting her gaze from her work. 2 hours into the surgery, they hit the first complication. "One of the feeding vessels is adhered to the speech center," Maya observed. This wasn't clear on the imaging. The assistant surgeon leaned closer to look. "Difficult approach. How do you want to proceed?" Maya paused, thinking through her options. This was why surgeries like this couldn't be fully planned in advance. The human brain was too complex, too individual. "We'll need to change our approach slightly," she decided. "We'll work around the speech center, isolate the vessel more proximally." As she adjusted her strategy, Maya thought briefly about Eleanor, the woman who had looked at her with such disdain just a day earlier. The woman who had doubted her abilities based solely on the color of her skin. That woman's ability to speak, to form words and communicate, now literally rested in Maya's hands. Bipolar forceps, Maya requested, extending her hand. With delicate precision, Maya began to separate the tangled vessel from the brain tissue. Every movement was calculated, every decision weighed carefully. The monitors beeped steadily, a reassuring rhythm in the background. "Small bleeder," the assistant surgeon pointed out. "I see it," Maya said calmly, her hands never faltering as she controlled the tiny hemorrhage before it could become a problem. 4 hours into the surgery, they were making steady progress. Maya had successfully isolated 3 of the main feeding arteries to the malformation, but the most difficult part still lay ahead. The central tangle itself, where arteries and veins connected in a chaotic web that defied normal vascular architecture. "This is where most surgeons would stop," Maya commented, more to herself than to the room. "But we need to get the whole thing." The room fell silent again as Maya worked, everyone understanding that they were witnessing something few surgeons would attempt. The tension in the room was palpable, a shared focus on the delicate task, unfolding beneath Maya's skilled hands. The first thing Elena noticed was the beeping, steady, rhythmic, slightly annoying. Then came awareness of her body, heavy, distant, as if it belonged to someone else. Her mouth felt dry, like sheep been chewing cotton. She tried to swallow, but couldn't quite remember how. "I think she's waking up," a woman's voice said from somewhere nearby. Elena struggled to open her eyes. The lids felt impossibly heavy. When she finally managed to crack them open, the world was a blur of white and blue and bright, painful light. "Mrs. Whitfield, can you hear me?" Another voice, male this time. Elena tried to nod, but wasn't sure if her head actually moved. A figure leaned over her, a nurse in blue scrubs. "You're in the recovery room," the nurse explained, adjusting something on an IV stand. "The surgery is over. Everything went well." Surgery. The word triggered a flood of memories, the headaches, the diagnosis, the arteriovenous malformation in her brain, and Dr. Johnson, the black doctor Elena had insulted, the doctor who had operated on her brain. Elena tried to speak, but only a dry croak came out. "Here," the nurse said, holding a small cup with a straw to Eleanor's lips. Small sips. The water was the most wonderful thing Eleanor had ever tasted. After a few sips, she tried again. "How long?" Her voice sounded strange to her own ears. "Your surgery lasted just over 6 hours," the nurse explained. "You've been in recovery for about 3 hours. Your husband is in the waiting room. Would you like to see him?" Elena nodded slightly, immediately regretting the movement as pain flared across her scalp. "Try not to move your head," the nurse cautioned. "I'll get your husband and let Dr. Johnson know you're awake." As the nurse left, Eleanor carefully tested her body. She could wiggle her fingers and toes. She could feel the scratchy hospital sheets against her skin. No numbness, no paralysis. The relief was overwhelming. The door opened and Tom rushed in, his face pale with worry. His usual neat appearance was disheveled, wrinkled clothes, uncombed hair, dark circles under his eyes. "Ellie," he whispered, taking her hand gently. "Thank God." Eleanor felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "I'm okay," she managed to say. Tom wiped away her tears with his thumb. Dr. Johnson came out after the surgery. She said it went perfectly. She got the whole thing, Ellie. The whole tangle of blood vessels. Before Eleanor could respond, there was a soft knock at the door. Dr. Johnson entered looking tired but composed. She had changed out of her surgical scrubs into her white coat, but Eleanor could see the faint lines on her face where the surgical mask had pressed against her skin for hours. "Mrs. Whitfield," Maya said, approaching the bed. She pulled out a small flashlight from her pocket. "I need to check your responses. Follow the light with your eyes, please." Eleanor obeyed, tracking the light as Maya moved it from side to side. "Good," Maya said. "Now can you tell me your full name?" "Eleanor Grace Whitfield." "And today's date?" Eleanor had to think for a moment. "Tuesday, April something." Maya nodded. "Close enough. You might be a bit disoriented from the anesthesia. That's normal." She put the flashlight away and made some notes on a tablet. "Can you squeeze my fingers?" Elena gripped Maya's fingers as firmly as she could. "Excellent." Maya turned to Tom. Her neurological responses are exactly what we want to see at this stage. Tom looked at Maya with open gratitude. Doctor, we can't thank you enough. Maya held up a hand. Just doing my job, Mr. Whitfield. Eleanor watched Maya's face as she continued checking vital signs and making notes. This woman had spent 6 hours inside Eleanor's brain, navigating delicate tissues and blood vessels with incredible skill. This woman had saved her life. You saved my life, Eleanor whispered, echoing her thoughts. Maya looked up from her tablet, her expression professional but gentle. That's my job. But Eleanor wasn't finished. I was wrong about you, she said, her voice gaining strength, and I'm sorry. For a moment, Maya's professional demeanor faltered. Something flickered across her face, surprise, perhaps, or recognition of the effort it took for Eleanor to acknowledge her mistake. Tom looked confused. What do you mean, Ellie? Eleanor shook her head slightly, wincing at the pain. It doesn't matter now. Maya finished her examination in silence. As she turned to leave, Eleanor reached out, catching her hand. Thank you, Eleanor said simply, for being better than me. Maya paused, the weight of those words settling between them. It wasn't the first time a patient had judged her unfairly, and it wouldn't be the last. But genuine realizations like this were rare. Recovery will take time, Maya said, gently disengaging her hand. You'll need physical therapy, regular checkups. But the prognosis is good. She moved toward the door, then stopped and turned back. And Mrs. Whitfield, it's never too late to learn and grow. That's what makes us human. As the door closed behind Dr. Johnson, Eleanor felt the truth of those words settle deep inside her. She had been given more than just a second chance at life. She had been given a chance to become a better person, and for the first time in a long while, she found herself truly wanting to take it.